Everybody. My name is Josh Clark, and I'm a territory sales manager working in both Iowa and Illinois for Simpleray. And I'm here today with Lewis Butler, our director of sales, to talk to you a little bit about the state of the industry for solar here in Illinois. So please go ahead and introduce yourself, Lewis.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time today, Josh. Lewis Butler, Director of Sales. I'm also an Illinois Solar Energy Association board member. I also serve on the Iowa version of that, which is called ISEA. So I try to keep up with policy as much as we can because it drives a lot of our customers' decisions. And as we get here towards the end of the year, it's really important to have this conversation and make sure everyone's on the same page going forward.
All right. Well, thanks again for joining us to do this, Lewis. So to start with, let's talk a little bit about the history of the adjustable block program, or what's commonly referred to as the ABP in Illinois.
Yeah, so the program, depending on who you talk to, you'll hear it referred to in different ways. The adjustable block program, there's a solar for all aspect of it, is created by the Future Energy Jobs Act, which people in the industry will refer to as FEJA. There's a SHINES name for it. But basically, customers get paid to install solar. And, we focus a lot on the C&I, small-scale utility side of things. And so those payments come out over a 5-year period. So, law passes, a bunch of people get excited to install solar, and then a bunch of applications go in. So many applications go into the system that they then have to invent a lottery to decide who's going to get which incentive level. Program rolls out, we start installing solar, we install this beautiful array that we see on the screen right here, which we're really excited about. And then the program kind of slows down starting this spring because all the funding has been allocated. And once all the funding became allocated, then they started creating a wait list for projects. So if you were allocated funding and you decide not to build your project, that funding then goes to the first project on the wait list and so on. And so we've seen quite a few projects pull off of the wait list and get built so far. But that's kind of like where things are at today as we head in towards the end of the year. There's a wait list, it's growing. We hope there's going to be more legislation that passes either this fall or next spring. The tax credit's declining. So it's a really interesting time to take a look at pulling the trigger on a project. Sure.
All right. So we have had some projects and some customers who have ended up on that wait list. Could you tell us a little bit about how that wait list works and what experience we've had as being a contractor who has customers put on and taken off of that wait list?
Yeah, so it's kind of good to start. What does it even take to submit a project for this adjustable block program or these incentives? And the first step is just to get interconnection approval. We fill out the paperwork, we do a little bit of design work, we go to the utility and say, hey, we're going to connect this solar array to your grid. Hypothetically, is that good to go? And then once we get that approval, then we can submit it to the program administrator and get in line for funding. So that it used to be, we would get approval for funding pretty quickly, and then we'd go build the project. And the graph that we're showing right now shows the wait list from a little bit before April of this year, when the wait list started, to basically current day. And as you can see, that line will go up and down over time. So every time it goes up, it means that somebody, an approved vendor, and we're an approved vendor, we handle all of the recs in-house. There's no third party involved. We think it cuts down on paperwork, and we get to save our customers a little bit of money that way. But every time an approved vendor submits a project to be put on the wait list, that's when those lines are increasing. And then when projects fall off, that's when you see those lines decreasing. So, if you look on the very left-hand side, you'll notice there's a big downward trend for a while. And if you ask me what happened, there's a couple of projects, everyone slowed down their sales cycle. And then once we realized projects were being pulled off the wait list on a fairly frequent basis there over the summer, we kind of kept selling projects and we'd see this churn. So even though the line isn't always downward trending, it's not always the same group of projects driving that line up. So, this wait list, it's constantly evolving. We've had I don't even know the number, but we've had a couple hundred kW at the very least come off in recent months. And, I know a couple of our projects are at the top of the wait list right now that we're hoping we're going to find out here before the end of the year that they get to move forward.
Great. So we know that getting on that wait list is important for maximizing the adjustable block funding. You mentioned a little bit earlier a term called safe harbor. Could you tell us why safe harbor is important, getting on that wait list, and what that means to safe harbor?
Yeah, this is a great plug. A couple of weeks ago, I did a webinar with our head of finance and VP of the company, David Birchmeyer. But simply put, safe harbor is a way, or safe harboring is a way that we can lock in that federal investment tax credit to the current tax year and then not build a project until, say, 2021. So the current federal investment tax credit stands at 26%. So if you do a $100,000 project, there's $26,000 of tax credits available before depreciation and the adjustable block program, all these other incentives. So if you put down, and there's a real bright line, at least 5%, and we buy some inventory before the end of the year, you can lock in that 26%. And so what we're advising people to do right now who are interested in doing these projects is sign a contract, give us enough money to basically submit the interconnection paperwork. We're going to see how the wait list looks as we go along in time. We're going to get you in line. And then come into the year, which, we're almost there, we can make a decision on how is legislation looking currently, what does future funding look like, how optimistic are we about building this project over the next year. And if it looks like the project could move forward, people really want to protect those tax credits, then we ask for a little bit larger deposit, we procure that equipment, we keep it in the warehouse with your name on it, and then if the project moves forward and gets funded next year, then we go ahead and we pull it out of the warehouse, we go build the project, and we've basically maximized all the incentives that we possibly could. The highest amount of tax credits, the highest payout from the adjustable block program that we can get, and we're going to get it built as soon as we can, hopefully, next spring, summer, and take advantage of some high production months there.
All right. So we understand as best we can now what the state of the industry is today. What sort of feelings or predictions or educated guesses could you possibly offer, Lewis, on what the future holds?
Yeah. So, I would say, Josh is being a very good host here, right? But I would say this changes on, like, I would say not quite a weekly basis, but maybe a monthly or quarterly basis. And COVID kind of threw a curveball. I would say the industry at large is optimistic that some sort of fix to the current funding mechanism for the adjustable block program will be passed, say, sometime in the next year. It's not guaranteed. Anything can happen in legislative session. And because of COVID, there was no spring session in Illinois. We're optimistic about a fall veto session. If not, there's a bunch of energy legislation that maybe would happen in the spring of 2021. But, we're currently investing resources in Illinois. We're still giving proposals in Illinois. And there was such a rush when the program first opened a couple of years ago that as long as there's funding again in the future, I don't think it's that big of a stretch of the imagination to imagine a huge backlog of projects going after any future funding at that point in time. It's not to say there won't be enough funding then, but to me, it seems like a very low-cost bet that there will be future funding, and it doesn't hurt to be first in line for when that money does become available. The other piece of this, which goes to this slide here, is currently in Illinois, in addition to the adjustable block program, there's another rebate called the smart inverter rebate, which has to do with the type of equipment that we install. That rebate is currently fairly lucrative or fairly nice for our customers to get. And what's eventually going to happen is once there's so much solar renewables on the grid, then what's going to happen is they're going to go in and reevaluate the value of that rebate. And so currently what Ameren has said is we've reached this 5% threshold that's written in the law. It's time for us to open up an investigation and go figure out how much these assets are actually worth on the grid to us And depending on where you're at, they might start to value solar on the grid differently than they do today. So from a metering perspective with the utility, a tax credit perspective, and an incentive program perspective, you kind of have like this good confluence of incentives where it'll be hard to get them much better than what they are currently. And you're seeing a lot of upheaval in the residential market right now as a result of the policy uncertainty surrounding how Ameren's going to deal with net metering. And then, the thought is whatever Ameren ends up doing or gets told what to do, you're going to see ComEd and any other investor-owned utilities go the same way.
So it sounds to me like, Lewis, there is still some uncertainty. No question. Isn't any way around that. But it makes sense if you're serious about doing solar in the short term that things will probably not look any more appealing than they do now. So getting yourself on that wait list for the very likely scenario in which the adjustable block program gets further funding is a smart move.
Yeah, and I think, for people who aren't as familiar with seeing these proposals, that we deal with day in and day out, a lot of these projects have paybacks where between the smart inverter rebate, the adjustable block program, tax credits, and depreciation, you're basically getting a free array before you even turn the thing on. Or, maybe your project has some more complexity or you have a really good cost of energy. Maybe it's a 1 to 3 year payback. If you're talking about those types of numbers, putting down $1,500 to get in line for a program that we think has a really high likelihood of coming back, it doesn't seem like that big of a risk, depending on how you want to look at it, right? I'm the sales guy, but from the expected value, what is the future hold perspective, the entry fee is pretty low.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the conversation so far, Lewis. Are there any other final points that you'd like to make before we wrap up?
No, I think, the biggest thing is, there's a lot that we do in our jobs every day, Josh. And I think the biggest thing is just consulting with people about what their current situation is, highlighting what risks there are, and, trying to put a dollar value on that as best we can. This webinar could be outdated a month from now, 2 months from now, 3 days from now, if some huge policy change happens that no one foresaw. All of our previous customers will be grandfathered in, but I think just sitting down and having the conversation and asking these types of questions is just really the starting point and seeing if it makes sense for people.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everybody who joined us to watch and listen to this webinar. And if this did spark some ideas, you have further questions, please reach out to us here at Simpleray, and we will do our best to get those answered for you.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.